So basically, I've been on some of these things, like what do people buy on phones? I've been watching this, and Jason Sparrow, who was here before, he made me do bottom-up research, talk to the people who actually give money to the brands, which end up with mobile ad networks. He really made me look for the money, and I sometimes talk to my brand advertiser friends in the US. And suddenly, at the end of last year, they told me people are, big brands like Old Navy are starting to really scale their budgets in mobile retail, right? The name Foursquare came up, Shopkeep came up, but however, the general feeling is, traditionally everything which people were really buying with their phones have been digital goods. So here's BOKU. And the question is now, are we really at something what in the mobile advertising space there was the autumn of 2008 with the iPhone moment, and then it was January 2010 with the Droid moment where, the bubble bursted, and we in this room, many of us are still benefiting from it. And the question is, right, are we really now at the verge of mobile retail and mobile real transactions taking off? Devindra, do you want to take this up and discuss with people how this bubble is looking like?
Sure. So mobile payments, it's a topic that's surprisingly just kind of exploded over the past few years. Actually, last year, VentureBeat, we were preparing our Mobile Beat conference. It was going to be all about 4G because everybody wants LTE and 4G phones, right? No. Apparently, everybody cares about mobile payments, which was kind of shocking to all of us. And we're seeing some crazy figures, right? Juniper says by 2015, mobile payments will account for $670 billion. And that's on top of all sorts of other figures that we're seeing, too. Stuff like, let me see here, it was the Boston Consulting Group said overall the internet economy will reach $4.2 trillion by 2016, and that's double 2010. So a lot of that is definitely going to be mobile. The thing is, are consumers seeing it? We're seeing a lot of money being thrown to mobile payments. We're seeing a lot of hype surrounding it. I don't necessarily think the consumer benefit is there. So how is mobile payments not just another bubble waiting to pop? Stuart, you go first.
Okay, thanks, Devindra.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Stuart Neal here from BOKU. So BOKU is a carrier-centric mobile payments organization. So I'm going to two ways to answer this question. So if you think about what is a payment, it's an interaction between buyers and sellers. And what we have now in the sophisticated mobile phone devices and operating systems of today is the ultimate interaction, the point of interaction. And what we're seeing now is merchants getting very, very interested about being able to access that point of interaction. It's the ultimate marketing channel. And this is why we're getting an awful lot of competition over who's going to own that access. Is it going to be the banks? Is it going to be the carriers? Or a whole plethora of players in between? So that's one thing, the ultimate marketing channel. And then secondly, this is not just about the mechanics of a payment. It's not just about replacing a piece of plastic with a mobile phone, but it's actually what are the value adds that you can layer on top of that to go back to the whole marketing piece. What can you do with that interaction with the consumer and all of the businesses that are evolving around driving value-added services into that space? So that's why I think it's not just another bubble.
Mm-hmm. Let's go down the line here. And actually, specifically, though, I guess I want to hear more. How do you guys think this will help consumers? Why should people care about it? Because honestly, swiping your credit card somewhere is pretty easy. It's a concept that people understand, and it's something we've been used to over the past few decades. Why should people move over? Go ahead, anybody.
So I'm John Boyd from ShopSavvy. We've got about 20 million downloads. We get a few million downloads a month. And part of what ShopSavvy does is it actually helps the consumer when they're in the store trying to make a buying decision. So the consumer's there in the store, and the opportunity that presents to the retailer, as most of you probably know, the retailers are going through huge amounts of pain right now. They're all they're caught flat-footed. They're trying to figure out retail is changing. How do we act? How do we react? And I think the benefit that they get now is you know the consumer's location, you know their buying interests, you know the goods that they've bought in the past, you know if they like DVDs, you know what kind of movies they like. You can capitalize on all that information and have much more of an autonomic, or what I call an autonomic shopping experience, where you're in the store and you all of a sudden have this brand new conversation with the retailers. It's not just they're checking prices or they're checking inventory. The retailer can actually start a dialogue with that consumer while they're in that store to give them offers. It could be advertising. It could be, hey, I've scanned this Sony TV. Don't buy that Sony, or buy this Vizio. Here's a coupon for 20% more. By the way, 4 of your friends have that same TV. Why don't you ask them what they think? Or if you all buy this together, we can give you another deal. So all of these conversations are going to be a new way for all these local retailers to fight back. So I think it's an opportunity for the consumer when they're in the store, and it's going to make shopping completely different than it is in 3 years than it is now. A huge amount of change.
Yeah, my name is Holger Lüder from Foursquare. I think it's definitely not a bubble. I think it's actually already there. Daily deal companies like Living Social and Groupon are already making hundreds of millions of dollars. I think Groupon just earlier this week announced that 25% of the transactions in the US are actually already done on the mobile phone. That's actually, I think, great news for us. They've helped us seed the market and kind of educate the merchants. I give you 2 examples of why I think mobile payments really make sense for the user and are kind of a massive benefit. I also kind of agree with what the other panelists had said. Well, first example is Card Case. It's not a product that's very well known here. Most people know, when they talk about Square, they know kind of the Square dongle that's getting more and more popular in the US. I'm using this Card Case product that they have, which allows me to, you basically pay via my mobile phone. And my experience actually in San Francisco is if I go to Cyclass Coffee, my local coffee store, I walk in, I order a coffee, and I tell them to put it on my tab, and the lady behind the counter, through the iOS region monitoring that the Card Case is leveraging on the iPhone, it actually sees my picture on the iPad in front of her, and she sees my picture and says, oh yeah, there's Holger. She basically just puts it on my account, and it's automatically basically deducted from my credit card. And that the consumer benefit there is, well, first of all, the convenience. I don't even have to take out my phone. I don't have to take out my mobile, my wallet. But every time I go there, it kind of makes me feel like I'm a total local and like a regular customer, right? Like the fact that I'm put it on my tab, I'm Holger, is like, I think it makes people feel really good. And loyalty is actually something that a lot of merchants are after. The other example is actually Foursquare related. So the things that we're doing with American Express, you tie your Foursquare account to your American Express card. That then gives you an American Express type experience in the Foursquare application, and you see special advertisement from Amex. My first experience was, hey, I checked in somewhere in Austin at South by Southwest last March at a bar, and I wanted to go for lunch, and I looked at the specials in the Foursquare app, and basically there was one deal from Amex that said, go down to this sandwich bar, and if you spend more than $10 with your credit card, then you get $5 discount. So the user experience is completely seamless because you go down there, I bought a beer and a sandwich on the weekend, and I paid with my credit card. Before the waitress came back, I already had a little pop-up in the application that said, American Express wanted to let you know that on your next credit card bill, you will have a $5 discount against this $12 purchase. Now, the waitress didn't even know this was going on, right? It's completely seamless. There's no interaction that you have to have with the merchant necessarily. And it's a total win-win because Amex obviously had the benefit of somebody using their credit card over MasterCard, Visa, Cash. It's great for the merchant because it drove traffic into their store, and it was great as a user that I got a deal from it. And by kind of enabling these type of mobile payment deals, you can really basically drive people into certain stores, and the targeting here is what actually really is the killer, right? So it was obviously a targeted ad that was for me in that location because I used Foursquare. It was completely real time. The merchant could have had, if their restaurant would have been full, they could have gone in real time into the system and said, I'm going to turn this ad off because I'm already busy with the capacity that I have. And then the other thing is, with Amex, think about it, we could theoretically give you an offer, if we know that you're a high spender on your credit card, maybe you're an expense account, you're a business traveler, maybe we give you entirely different offers than for somebody who only charges $50 to $100 on their credit card, per month. So the kind of targeting capabilities are just really make the offers better and give a better, user experience basically to the user.
So one thing just to chime in there, and I think it kind of hits on what you're trying to get at, as is it a bubble, or is mobile payments a bubble or not? I think it's different depending on where you are. If you're in the developed world, it's a very different kind of a use case and a very different problem being solved than, say, if you're in Africa and the only way you can pay is with your phone because your telephone company has billing set up. That's the only way to get that mechanism actually working. In the United States, the problem that you're solving is not as well defined.
Yeah.
You know, and at ShopSavvy, you know, we talk to all the banks, we talk to all the deal companies. I do think the consensus that you're hearing from the panel is the way you answer that question is very, very targeted offers based on what that consumer would want while they're actually in the experience in real time. That's how you sort of make it interesting. But a lot of the hype or a lot of the bubble is when people are just simply talking about, well, NFC, or I want to make these payments happen, or well, credit cards work great. Like you can take your credit card, you know, even if you look at some of the apps out there, you know, the Starbucks app that everyone talks about, I use that app. It doesn't actually make my experience faster. You know, it's handy to have that all on my phone, but if I actually time my experience from beginning to end, it's not so much better. So I think it's more about defining, hey, a very, very targeted deal, very, very targeted offers, bringing all of those in. But I think a lot of the big banks and a lot of the big entities going after mobile are now stumbling because they have not defined, well, what's the problem exactly that I'm solving? I'm doing mobile payments. Isn't that fantastic? So it's a bubble without all the upside of people making money, right?
Yeah.
Which is one of the most important parts of a bubble. So it's
And part of the confusing aspect too is that mobile payments can pretty much include anything related to your phone or payments or other, like you could be scanning, you could use NFC. How do you guys see that affecting, I guess, the success of mobile payments as a whole? It just seems confusing as a category, or does that not even matter? Will the more confusing aspects just go away?
I think you have to, you're right, it has to be well defined. You've got to be solving a problem, right? And for us, we think about it in terms of convenience and enablement. So the previous question around why would consumers use it? Well, because it's easy. And when you think about it compared to cash, as opposed to comparing it to cards, you know, it's far more convenient to use your mobile phone. And let's face it, most of us have got them welded to our ear or in our pockets the whole time. So, and then on the other side, we look at it in terms of enablement. So enabling new players, new people to come into that ecosystem, whether it be in mobile banking in developing worlds, or different demographics within developed worlds, so using your mobile phone as an identifier to pay online, for example. You know, and then on top of that, it's enabling new capability, new functionality, like some of the value adds that my colleagues here have mentioned. So,
Gotcha. So one thing, have you guys in the audience, have you read this New York Times article about Target's insane customer data monitoring? So the thing is, like, Target as a company for a couple of years has been doing this thing where they've basically been tracking consumers, you know, without them knowing it through their credit cards or whatever. Their analytics are so good now that they can predict that a teenage girl is going to be pregnant even before she knows. So this article has raised all sorts of craziness. You guys are talking about, like, the great data that companies are going to be getting about these consumers. Should consumers be worried about too much of their experience being there?
It's always a trade-off between the value and the information that you get and what you're giving up. If I'm walking through a Best Buy, and they say, well, hey, we're going to give you never shop in appliances. You know, we're going to give you an extra deal on appliances. If you go just browse through this section, we're going to give you an extra 30% off. And then I find out Best Buy has great appliances and they give me a great deal. If you can somehow use it to a useful end and a useful use case, I think that, I mean, I use Gmail. The privacy, the data mining there is extensive. I mean, the things that they know are not things that I want them to know. But if I'm doing some kind of a trade-off where the application is extremely useful and I'm conscious of what that trade-off is and what's happening, and I'm consciously making that, then I think that's a good trade that most consumers will want to make.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that point. There's definitely the trade-off. You know, we're, for example, trying to provide value by, you know, looking what your social graph is doing in terms of locations, what they prefer, looking what you've liked in the past, and we can predict on the algorithms that we're building on top of our data. We can hopefully make good recommendations of what you should be doing next. But the other, I think, important part about the whole topic of privacy and data is, I think you, as a company, you just need to be transparent, right? I think there was a question yesterday on another panel about, you know, whether we need more regulation, and my answer was, you know, I think like consumers and the user will ultimately regulate. And so I think if you as a company, and we take this extremely seriously at Foursquare because we deal with very, very private, you know, and information like somebody's personal location. If you're really transparent about how you use the data, who you're sharing the data with, give the users a lot of control of how they can share the data, I think that's kind of ultimately what people will look for. And if you don't do that, I'm pretty certain that people will not, you know, stop using those services. So I think it's kind of going to solve itself. Right.
I do agree. I completely agree. If the user can set their own willingness to accept these services, and then the providers of those services will live or die on the basis of how good and how well they target specific offers at individuals. So this is, does away with the idea of spam coming down the email for services that you don't want. It's about targeted offers based on your own personal behavior.
Although some people could see that as spam when you're in the store, so spam goes everywhere now. It's not just in your inbox. So
It can come down the phone.
yeah. Okay. One thing I've been noticing in the run-up to mobile payments and all the hype surrounding it, it seems a lot like the run-up to e-commerce in general, right? It seems like the time when people were saying Amazon will never succeed and Pets.com failed. It seemed like that whole economy would never happen, and look at it now. What do you think we can learn, from the late 90s and the rise of the internet economy when it comes to mobile payments?
I think the biggest thing from the 90s is try and avoid the carriers. I mean, I think one experience, I was at a carrier, that's where I started my career, and I mean, I loved that experience. It was an amazing experience. You got to see a company grow from nothing to a huge company overnight, but carriers are really hard when it comes to innovation, and even in the conference so far, it still seems like they have not learned their lesson, right? Mm-hmm. They're still fighting that battle like in the late 90s. And people were trying to innovate in mobile payments, or they're trying to innovate in shopping, or around deals, or in check-ins. I think deals with the carriers, and I've actually I've seen stumbling, by folks trying to get into mobile payments when they're trying to go through the carriers. Deals just stop, right? Because they're still fighting those same battles, and I wait for lessons or indications that they've learned the lessons of the past. You'd think that Steve Jobs, Apple would have taught him that. I don't see that happening. That's the biggest lesson.
I think one of the trends, or one of the things that I definitely think is true about mobile payments and everything that's going on with mobile apps right now is that we can't even fathom what we're going to do and what we are talking about here, like as complete kind of science fiction, what we're going to do in 2 or 3 years. I'm just remembering like when, in the early days of e-commerce, people thought like, oh, you're only going to buy digital goods, and like I'm never going to buy my fridge on I couldn't even imagine like going to a hardware store right now. I would much rather buy it actually via Amazon and have it shipped to me. Like the whole convenience factor,
right.
It's not a problem today to pay over with your credit card over the internet. The analogy is we're seeing I give you one example. It's not really mobile payment related, but it is something where we see this big shift in how people are using information. We're seeing ourselves at a point where usage on Foursquare, for example, is completely transitioning right now. It's similar to what Twitter has seen maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Twitter used to be all about like, I got to tweet, where I am, what I'm doing, and so forth. And then Twitter, I guess, at some point realized, oh, wait a second, there's like all these people that are actually just consuming the tweets, right? And so I think now the ratio is 10% of the people are tweeting and 90% are reading those tweets, right? We're seeing the same thing. Initially I thought even we believe that people will check in, and that's going to be one of the key drivers. And when you look at the application, check-in is kind of at the forefront of what we're doing. But we're seeing also this trend to like consuming the data and like basically leveraging it to kind of understand what you're doing around you. And again, like I think consumer behavior will change. People's view on what's possible and what they would be willing to do will change. And I think that's going to be definitely true for what's happening in mobile payment as well.
Okay, what about questions? Devindra, I'm jumping in.
Go ahead.
Anybody have questions for the panel? We really want to give you guys a forum. Okay, good, but you got to talk into the microphone because so Eddie.com from the Valley, he's a famous vlogger, is going to YouTube clip this thing, and we'll throw the links out tomorrow. So speaking to the mic so you can get picked up. Where's my guy?
Yeah. Real quick, Dion Lyle with Emanate in the U.S., but we cover global. This is for you, Stuart. Digital goods on BOKU, I get. What about physical goods? Will the carriers ever get their pricing to where physical goods can be charged on the phone bill? Question.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. I think you've got to look at them as slightly different things. So obviously the downloading of virtual goods directly onto a carrier bill is an existing and growing market, which is really exciting for us. But I guess we're interested in bringing carriers into the more everyday purchase areas, and to be frank, we're not able to do that without leveraging existing payment rails. So once these things get out into point of sale, it's going to take a long time to try and replicate what's taken the payment schemes 40 years to build. And our approach to that would be to partner with those guys. So you may have seen that we've partnered with MasterCard to deliver a point-of-sale product. So I guess to short answer your question, they're slightly different products, and therefore the economics will be more akin to traditional payments.
Anybody else? One more? Hold on, let me give you the mic. Just tell me who you are and what you got to say.
My name is Dmitry from Yota. So I think you're talking more about goal definition, because if you're talking about how hard it is to work with the carriers, because only one goal they have actually is participate in money flow. And all the young people that are sitting here, that's like probably right people who just want to innovate and change the world the right way, make it better, like faster, more convenient. And all the big companies, including Visa, they just, let's say, truly want to participate in money flow. It's not about innovation. And if you find a company with the right goals, it's not a problem to like change the way we are paying for goods, real goods or virtual goods. But when I'm talking like to guys from even from PayPal or operator, they always seeing like box signs in the eyes and nothing else.
From my perspective, the innovation will probably come from companies that are not even around right now. I think, by the way, I not entirely agree with that. I think there's a lot of people at Visa and PayPal and those places that are actually thinking of how they are not going to be out innovated by like smaller companies like us. But I don't know. So I guess the point is, if they are not innovating, they're going to be replaced because yes, they are trying to protect like the existing revenue streams. But it's never been like I mean there's cases where people can protect certain revenue flows for a long time, but I don't think it's going to be endless. I'm very, very certain that innovation is going to drastically change kind of mobile payments and so forth over the coming years.
If you're asking, or one take on that, if you're asking where innovation is going to come, I think it's different depending on where you look. I think abroad, particularly in emerging markets, a lot of the innovation will come through relationships with carriers. In, say, the more developed markets like the United States, and Europe, I think innovation, or at least in the United States, my theory or my thesis is that it's not going to so much come from some of the big financial institutions, but it's going to come perhaps from the retailers themselves who are trying to look at new ways to compete and bring foot traffic in. They're suffering, right? All of them are suffering. A fantastic speech or keynote was given by the CEO of Best Buy. He did a wonderful job. But these guys are all trying to be extremely creative. Creativity comes from pain, right? And so they've got pain. And so they're going to try and figure out how do we reach the customer in new ways. So my bet, if I were to put money on it, is where the innovation will come is it'll come from the retailers themselves. And one or two of them will start doing something, then the rest of them will follow along. It's exactly where most people don't expect, right? Most people don't expect anything there, and that's probably where it'll come.
All right, well, thank you. That was great. Devindra, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, panel.